Hi everyone, welcome to SplunkGuru. So today we are going to discuss one of the important topics in Splunk, and that is Splunk, the search processing language. So after ingestion of the data, how do we get into inside of the data, right? Like the ingestion part is done, but now what's next? So after ingestion of the data, how we can get into the inside of the data, how to utilize that data, how to come to the conclusion from the data that has been ingested, right? So that's what we are going to discuss today. In short, we call it as a SPL, that is search processing language. So after ingestion of the data, we need to write these Splunk search queries to get into the inside of the data. And what is SPL in simple terms? If you see here, it's a query language, and it's a core component of Splunk SPL. So without writing SPL, you can't really get into the reality of the data, right? So the ingestion part is done, but to get into the reality of the data, like what data says, we should know like how to write the search processing language in Splunk. So SPL is nothing; it's a query language, and it's very similar to SQL. If you know how to write the SQL queries, uh, so the major difference between SQL and SPL is the SQL queries you write mainly on the structured data, right? The data that's stored in the database tables, and then you write SQL queries to pull out to fetch that data from the tables. However, SPL, it's also a query language, but it basically works on the unstructured data. So like whatever data that has been ingested to Splunk, you can search on that, you can filter on that, there are transforming commands in Splunk, you can use that to transform the data. And then like by writing the SPLs, you can uh, reach to the conclusion from the data, like what it says, what's happening to the machine. Like if it's networking device data, you can easily get to know what's happening behind those machines, what kind of logs are being generated from those machines, and it helps you to cater the issues that you are facing with any of the machines, like, right? So like you can easily capture the errors, exceptions. So it helps a lot in troubleshooting part as well. And it like as when you start writing SPLs, you'll get to know that it follows the pipeline structure. So you write the first command, and then for another command you put the pipeline. So it basically follows the pipeline structure. Like for example, if you see here, right, the sample query, if you see here, so it's pulling out the data from the index internal, and if you see here, it's taking the count by grouping the results with the source type. So it's very similar to SQL queries. There also you have the function called group by. Here it says just by clause. So that's how you write the SPLs. Now moving to the next slide. So SPL syntax, as I said, it follows the pipeline structure by passing data from one command to another. And like so the operation that's happening in the first command, that's being used by the another command that's followed by the pipeline, right? So for example, if you see here, this part first, index web and source type apache, so it pulls you the actual events from this index and source type, and then you see this pipeline structure, right? So now this command states works on this data. So this is your first part of the query, this is second command here. So this states works on the data that has been pulled out from index web and source type apache. So that's the pipeline structure, uh, and that's what Splunk follows. Okay, now moving to the next slide. Okay, so now on this slide, if you see, I tried to outline some pro tips for writing the SPLs. For example, if you see the first part of this slide, right? If you see, there are two queries mentioned, or the first one is this one, and the second one is this one. So what it says, both the queries pulling out the data from the foo index, and here if you see, it's grouping the result set on the host field first, and then it's looking out for the data only from the host var, right? So here what's happening, it firstly pulls out the data, complete data from this index, and then it's filtering the data only for this host, right? So it's a it's more resource consuming way of writing the queries, right? Because you are firstly pulling out the data and then filtering out. However, on the other hand, if you see this query, it also pulls out the data from the same index. However, we are applying the filter here first. So now what happens, instead of pulling out the complete data from this index, it look out for this host equals to bar, and it gives you only the matching events, right? And then you can group the result set. You can just pull out the states on the host field or whatever. So this is less resource consuming because you are filtering out the data first. So it's very important, crucial to apply the filters as soon as possible before processing the complete data. If you can apply the filters first, that's going to get you the result faster, right? Now, if you see the second point here, it says use inclusion over exclusion, right? So for example, this field equals to full, like if, for example, in your data, if there is any field, so I'm just giving you the example here, field equals to field, maybe the name of this field is something else. Now, if you filter out, if the data that you are looking out for, maybe field equals to A, V, so whatever value A, V, C, right? So if you can provide that inclusion there, field equals to A or field equals to B or field in A, V, C, whatever it is. So that's the better way of writing the queries instead of saying that I don't need this data, I don't need this data. So this is comparatively is going to be more resource consuming. So inclusion is always better. Like if you know for sure that you need this data, it's better to filter accordingly instead of writing not or not equals to, right? Time ranges, this plays a major role when you run your SPLs. So by default, it runs out for 24 hours. But if you're running out for all times or last 7 days, 30 days, whatever it is. So that plays a crucial role in pulling out the data for you, and accordingly it will take time. So it's always suggested that you select the appropriate time, like from which range you need the data. For example, if you're working on an troubleshooting session, right, and you need to look out for the events from last month or last week, right? So you select the time range accordingly instead of running it for some random time or dates, so that will be time consuming. The fourth one, select necessary fields. So fields, obviously, like whatever fields you need, if you know that I just need these selected fields from the data, so it's always better to use the fields command and then pick only the relevant fields that are required for you for the further processing. So that way it doesn't pull you the unnecessary fields that are not relevant for your Splunk query. So these are some major points that you should take care while working on the SPLs. And I think it's a quick session on the quick intro of SPL, how it works, the basic syntax of SPL, the tips that you should remember when working on the SPLs. Now I think that's it for this session. So in next video, I'll walk you through on, like, by logging into the Splunk web, I will walk you through on writing some basic SPLs. Okay, I think that's it for this session. So I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.